and trying to understand exactly where CBIS fits in when you think about the agricultural life cycle, the agricultural supply chain. So tell us exactly what you do with the seeds from larger companies.
Cool. Can I give you a little bit quick framework so you understand where we fit into?
You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, I always look at the iPhone. The iPhone's filled with software chips, right? They in-license from other people. And so you got to think of seed as an iPhone. And but it's seed as opposed to software and chips. It has a genome. That's it. It doesn't have any hearts or lungs or bones. It just has a genome. And so what farmers do is try to make the genome more efficient. And so what a genetic company does is try to make it more efficient. And you do it one of two ways. You try to make the germplasm, which is what you call the thing, yield more, or you try to handle traits, which you try to deal with problems the farmers have, like insects and weeds and too much fertilizer. And so we try to we focused on that. And so what we do is we won the Fast Company 100 Best Innovations this year. We did it because they call it the analog to digital moment. We have a factory, so a customer can send us their elite germplasm. We take a single cell from it. We can make the edits in their cell, in their seed, and 12 to 18 months send it back to them. And so if we have a thing for weeds, it's something that would help them with weeds. And so that's the nature of our business, and they pay us just like iPhone pays their in-licensors. It's an in-licensing business in an agriculture business.
So we talked about extreme weather as one of the problems that's plaguing farmers right now, but you mentioned insects. Give us a few more, I guess, examples of the problems that farmers are facing that you're solving.
Oh, perfect. So there's a couple of big main areas. Monsanto kind of created this world, but GMO technologies got stopped. And so the whole point now is we're able to restart it because the traits we do are indistinguishable from nature. That's why on a regulatory basis, everybody's regulating us like regular breeding. So it's pretty well defined. You want to fix weeds, you want to fix disease, you want to fix insects, you want to fix fertilizer, and you want to be able to help them adjust to weather. You know, the weather's just changing so much that I talk about the fact that disease, not just the temperature, the diseases in Alabama are now up in Saskatchewan. So you need to be able to change to adopt that. I think one of the areas we're really focused on is disease. Disease plagues just kills the plants. And so we believe we're on the precipice of having the first disease trait. Sorry.
No, it's fine. So I'm looking at the supply chain function on the Bloomberg terminal, and according to our analysis, customers of yours include Cisco, Bayer, Purdue Farms, S&W Seed Company, and more. Yep. I'm wondering about the idea of genetically modified foods and genetically modified ingredients, and here's why. I'm of the age where, have a mom who didn't want to feed us those things. Yep. And you go and buy a box of name the cereal, and it will tell you whether or not it contains genetically modified ingredients.
Yes.
Should we be worried about it?
So I think even the GMO world is pretty well tested. But the cool for us is we're dealing with the 5 major crops. So that all goes into your cereals, right? And even the Greens have said, if these guys can make changes in plants that are indistinguishable from nature, we should not worry about it.
When you say indistinguishable from nature, what do you mean?
That when we send it to a customer, we prove to them that all we did was change exactly what they wanted and nothing else happened. And also that the changes we made were changes that you could prove could have been made by nature. And this is a pretty cool quality control mechanism.
Is there evidence, or at least do you need to go through a rigorous testing process to make sure that it's not going to have adverse effects on humans?
I think the idea is that if it's the same as nature, that's what most of the regulatory people are hanging their hat on. The breeding could have the same thing. As long as you're making changes that the body naturally makes, and that's what we do. We hijack the body's own repair mechanism. That's how it works. That I think all the regulatory people have alarmed. They just approved us with a big thing, and they put a big safety study out. So they spent years making sure when they went out and approved it, here's what their proof was. And so I think for the Europeans, after banning GMOs, to come out and say, you should feel that this is safe, I think is a pretty big endorsement. So
this is not considered GMOs?
This is not considered GMO. No, you won't see us labeled except for maybe CBIS Power to prove to you that we did it without GMOs.
Okay.
No, we are not. That's exactly what Europe said. And we have something called oligonucleotide-directed mutagenesis, but what Europe said was...
Easy for you to say.
What Europe said is their headline was that. This is safe, because it's the same as nature. Cool.
So you work with corn, wheat, canola, rice, and soy. What about those crops that makes it easy for you to work with those? And is there an expansion in the future?
Oh, there totally will be an expansion. The first was, those are 1 billion acres. This is the main industry, right? So, so you know, soybean in just Brazil, the United States is 200 million acres. So you want to deal with these big grains. That's where most of the soybean thing. But we have peanut. Our next target is non-allergenic peanuts. There's no question we're going to be able to do non-allergenic peanuts.
No question.
Yes.
How do you do this? This is amazing.
And you should know, my scientists are probably rolling over in their grave that I said no question, so I apologize. But
It's going to happen next week.
No, it's just we know what genes to change. And we know what genes to change. And for allergenic peanuts, there's so much language out there, research of where things are. They just never had technology like ours to be able to make the changes. And so you know exactly, and peanuts is more complicated than making it out to be, but we've been doing it for so long. We're pretty confident that the changes you'd have to make.
So would that mean that somebody who has a child with a peanut allergy would go and buy a special type of peanut butter that is made with your modifications, and then that person will not suffer the risks associated with the peanut allergy?
Yes, but we think of it bigger than that. We think of it that everybody's going to switch to our peanut. And so when you go into the store, every peanut will be a peanut that tastes the same, that is non-allergenic.
Everyone will get the chance to have a Reese's
That's it.
peanut butter cup.
My son can't take peanuts to school.
Yeah.
Right.
And so to change that would be a big thing. That's why you don't want it to be a specialty thing. You want it to be a center part of the food supply.
So you talked about the regulation in Europe. In the U.S., is it helping or hurting you right now?
The U.S. was one of the first to adopt this. They came out with something called Am I Regulated? And you can go online, and we have like 18 products approved from them as being, we're not going to be regulated, and nobody else has more like 3. So we've been doing this for so long. So the U.S. actually has adopted, and so has Latin America. The big challenge was, and we call it like a 25-year activist program to get Europe to adopt equivalent to nature traits as nature. And we won that battle.
We're Bloomberg, so we got to talk about the stock market performance. Last year was a really good year for you guys, up 166%. So far this year, down 45%. What, in your opinion, are investors not seeing?
I think for all of us, we got attacked by different people at different points. I think that making people more understand exactly what it is. It's a new industry and the potential from it, and that's really been our challenge, and that's what we're working on.
What's your addressable market, in your opinion?
My addressable market is 500 million acres that are grown in the developing world, and then for something like soybean, it's 200 million acres controlled by 4 people.
How much have you penetrated with that?
Well, they're just becoming our customers. So the big seed companies have all adopted our technology. So we're not selling any traits yet.
If there are only 4 companies that do this, what's the risk of a company coming in and buying you, so then your technology doesn't go to those other 3 companies?
It's always a risk, but I think in general they've adopted the idea that there's so many things that can be done that we should be doing the things, and we really haven't had that kind of challenge.
Roy, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was really a treat.
Well, next time, let's do this in San Diego, because is that where you're based, or are you based in Minnesota?
No, actually, I'm in New York, and we have Minnesota, and we have San Diego,
So
we have it all covered. So it's just easy for me.
So we can do this every week.
Yeah, come on back. Or we'll do something from San Diego at some point, because that sounds
I hope
pretty
it
good.
addressed a lot of your questions. I look forward for me to be able to give you a background on this industry.
It absolutely did, and I'm never going to think of eating a box of cereal the same way, so do appreciate that.
Cool. The sugar anyways. I can't do anything with your sugar.
Roy Riggs is the CEO over at CBIS. CBUS is the ticker, joining us here in the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. Let's get a check on the latest world and national news. We got Amy Morris in the Bloomberg 99.1 newsroom in Washington, D.C. Hey, Amy.
Hi, Tim. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is returning to the Middle East. He's working to keep a ceasefire proposal between Israel and Hamas alive. Blinken is set to meet with senior officials. He'll continue to push forward a plan that the Biden administration says would pause fighting and guarantee the release of Israeli hostages, and it would set in motion the rebuilding of Gaza, plus a longer-term solution to the conflict. Next week's trip will be his 8th visit to the region since the war began. President Biden, meanwhile, delivered a speech during a visit to Normandy for the 80th anniversary of D-Day, where he reiterated the U.S. and its allies' right to help defend Ukraine against Russia.
As we gather here today, it's not just to honor those who showed such remarkable bravery on that day, June 6, 1944. It's to listen to the echoes of their voices, to hear them, because they are summoning us, and they're summoning us now.
Biden made that speech hours after apologizing to Ukraine President Vladimir Zelensky for the 6-month delay in military aid. Now, with that apology, about $225 million, part of the $61 billion that was held up by political infighting in Congress, and that allowed Russia to make some gains on the battlefield. Vladimir Zelensky was grateful to have his military revitalized and hoped an end to the war would come soon.
I hope that it will be a first step on this way to peace. We need peace in Ukraine.
The funding will be used to restore the country's damaged power grid, and it'll help pay for munitions. A U.S. military-built pier, meanwhile, designed to carry badly needed aid into Gaza by boat, has been reconnected to the beach there. Central Command Vice Admiral Brad Cooper says operations will be ramped up with a goal to get 1 million pounds of food into Gaza every 2 days. Global news, 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg.
It's 3:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. Choppy session in the red right now. 20 minutes to go until we wrap up the trading week. We are on track for an up week. S&P right now, lower little change, down 1 point. Let us head right over to the first word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. Here he is, Bill Maloney.
And good afternoon, Shai. That's right. U.S. stocks quiet in a choppy session amid the spike in yields. The Dow is currently lower by 46 points. S&Ps are a little changed, and NASDAQ is lower by 30. The U.S. 10-year yield surged to 4.42% after the jobs data. Gold is lower by 80, oil trading in the red, and Bitcoin, that's lower by 2.1%. Among the main 11 S&P sectors, leaders were financials and the industrials. Real estate materials were under pressure, and leaders to the upside in the Dow, 3M and Travelers, while Walmart and McDonald's led to the downside. After earnings, DocuSign fell 3.6%, and in other news, GameStop filed to sell up to 75 million shares. Wrapping things up, the NVIDIA 10-for-1 stock split takes effect after the close tonight. Live from the first breaking news desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie?
Okay, we thank you very much, Bill Maloney. And by the way, GameStop right now down 39%. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type squawk, SQUA, on your Bloomberg terminal. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no.
Who's gonna drive you home?
Honey, please, I'll do the driving.
Drive on.
Excuse me, I want to drive.
You drive me crazy.
It's the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
Well, look at that. 18 minutes to go on this close of equity trading. On this Friday jobs day, June 7th, 2024. It's time for our drive to the close. We're joined by Lance Cannon, portfolio manager over at Hood River Capital Management. Lance joins us from Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. Lance, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. How about yourself?
Yeah, we're doing pretty well. Trying to make sense of this payrolls report, given that there were a lot of indications moving into it that we had seen some weakening in the labor market. And that's certainly not what we saw today. What was your view?
I think confusion like everyone else at this juncture, right? I think there's a lot of things that are going to play at this juncture from the perspective of the market. I think we'd all like some direction, but that's not what we appear to be getting. So we kind of expect more volatility as we continue to move forward. You're going to see a lot of different, I think, variations and signals that are going to be out there. It's going to result in just this choppiness that we see, which then means that you want to be involved with companies and firms that are looking at high quality businesses that then are going to be able to weather this storm better than others.
I write about ETFs, and I'm looking at ETF flows, and there was a fund from BlackRock, the iShares S&P 500 Growth ETF. It took in almost $3 billion in one go. We're thinking that might be from a model portfolio, but talk about that, bid that seems to exist in the market right now of investors continuing to buy these growth stocks, S&P 500. Obviously, everyone's talking about NVIDIA. Is that where you're telling clients to go as well?
Great question. We're definitely fans of growth. I'm a portfolio manager of an international growth fund, so I'm definitely all for going and looking for growth type companies. And you think about over the long term, kind of what's going to happen. You want to be involved with companies that are going to grow. They're looking to expand their market share. They're part of exciting and new adventures. They're going to drive profitability and efficiencies within the overall economy. And if you can identify those type of companies that are out there that are going to be able to grow, not only through good and bad times, it's going to allow you to be able to weather these type of storms a lot better relative to if you were, in a more mature state, and when you're losing market share to some of these like up and coming tech companies.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about some of your picks that you write. BBB Foods. I've never heard of that.
Yeah. BBB Foods is a store similar to like a Walmart, if you will, down in Mexico. They recently came to market here in the U.S. So it's a U.S. listed company, but it's Mexican driven. All their stores are in Mexico. They're seeing, they've got great opportunities out there. They have opportunity to expand both their regional box spaces, and then also they're seeing great uplift in terms of customers coming to the brand and identifying and relating to the value-driven store that they're bringing to the marketplace. And so what we believe we're seeing right now is that you got 14% plus kind of same store sales growth, then you marry that to 15% box growth on a year-over-year basis. You're getting close to, if not into the 30s in terms of top line revenue growth. And at the same juncture, as you have that type of leverage within the model, you have the opportunity to see expanding margins and overall earnings growth, which then is driving, a share price that should be moving higher. Yet at the same time, the reason why we like this thing is because valuation is important to us here at Hood River. The company trades as if it's a more mature company with, mid to high single-digit growth. Yet you're seeing almost 3 times that. And so we really like this type of stories. We're going to have this type of growth that seems to be sustainable over the long term.
This is interesting, international small cap growth. To be honest, I don't speak to a lot of sources that specialize in this area. Why does that trade make sense given the macro environment that we're in right now, where we have the Fed still likely staying hawkish, perhaps other countries around the world beginning to ease, but that dollar still being really strong, and the rates market, at least in the U.S., still pretty high?
That's a great question, and one that we encounter quite frequently. If you look at large cap as a whole, you alluded to the kind of S&P 500 ETFs earlier. Those type of funds are trading at a premium relative to small cap, particularly in international small cap. They're trading at a premium as well. Historically speaking, small cap growth is traded at a premium relative to the S&P 500 or the large cap type names internationally. And right now that's inverse. And so we think that's a great opportunity because we're seeing great positive earnings revisions in the small cap world. You've got the opportunity to see outsized growth going forward as well. And then if you layer on top of that, all that together, just the opportunity that you have for inefficiencies in small cap relative to large cap. We feel there's phenomenal inefficiencies in the marketplace in small cap relative to large cap, which then allows us to identify the best companies to generate alpha for our clients and really drive home a great product value for our customers.
Another pick that you have sent along our way that I know you're eager to talk about is ticker DESP. It's the online travel platform. It's out of Argentina, but it's U.S. listed on the NASDAQ. Despegar.
Yeah, Despegar is like you said, it's an online travel platform. When we go through and look at kind of what's been happening, I know there's a lot of talk here, our conversation earlier about the consumer and what's happening there and how, we're getting conflicting data points. One thing that we are hearing a lot, and we talk to just individuals that you may know, is that the one thing they're still doing without a doubt is travel. You've got plenty of data points that are showing that. If you go to an airport anytime in the last month or even time in the next month, you're probably going to feel like everyone else in the world is traveling with you. And Despegar is one of those companies that we feel is going to be able to take advantage of that. They've got an AI component to it on their platform as well. It helps people plan their travels. They're integrating into the ability to say, if I'm going to go to, this place in Argentina, for example, it's then also going to list you, hey, here's the recommendations we give to you for hotels. We're going to give you some ideas of things you can do. So it helps you kind of plan through that whole trip, all a single click of a button. And we're seeing that they're starting to gain steam. They're growing at call it mid-teens percentage on the top line. We feel like there's some levers they have to pull that's going to allow them to grow even faster going forward. They've got an expanding EBITDA margin line, and they're trading at a discount relative to their peers who are growing at a third or even a fourth of what they're growing, and not seeing EBITDA margins expand. And so we feel like, again, this is another one of those, these are the type of scenarios we look for, where you got these great companies that are gaining market share, that are expanding their margins and driving value back to the shareholders.
Lance, we only have 30 seconds left, but give us one more pick that is on your radar, that should be on the radar of our listeners and viewers.
So one other name that I think is pretty interesting right now is a company out of the UK called Just Group, ticker's JUST. It's a company that's in the financial sector. Again, similar to the theme that you've heard me with the other two names, it's a name that we believe is going to be growing faster than their peers, has the opportunity to expand margins. They're in the pension and risk management side of things for the financial companies that are over there. And there's a lot of financial opportunities that are over there too, just kind of given the nature of how they go about their retirement platforms. And at the end of the day, this is a company that we think is going to expand their EPS.
Okay.
You're going to see faster EPS growth relative to the top line, and should be a great opportunity for people in the long run as well.
Lance, good to talk to you, and great to get those names on that we don't talk about each and every day here on the show. That's Lance Cannon, Portfolio Manager at Hood River Capital Management, joining us from Florida. Coming up next, it's Beyond the Bell, our cross-platform coverage.
company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. 7 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell. GameStop shares are plunging now by 38.9%. The stock tumbling further after the highly anticipated return of Keith Gill to YouTube, as well as the video game retailer unexpectedly releasing earnings and announcing plans to sell up to 75 million additional shares. GameStop down 38.8%. AMC Entertainment, another meme stock that a lot of people have been focusing on, AMC, down now by 14.9%. Bain Capital has agreed to buy education software provider Power School Holdings in a $5.6 billion deal. Power School on a down day for the rest of the market, up now by about 0.1%. Some of the other stories that we're following: a federal judge has ruled that Alphabet will face a bench trial instead of a jury in the Justice Department's antitrust case alleging monopolization of the advertising technology market after the company paid the government $2.3 million. Lyft is expecting gross bookings to grow about 15% at a compound annual rate over the next 3 years. Shares of Lyft today, right now we do have Lyft shares. They are trading lower by 0.5%. Rival Uber higher by 0.4%. DocuSign shares, they are plunging now by 5.1% after the e-signature company forecasts billings for the second quarter that did fall short of the average analyst estimate. Shares of DocuSign down right now by just about 5.1%. DocuSign now at $51.83 a share. And those are some of our top company stories at this hour. I'm Charlie Pellet, and this is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio and Television.
It is Bloomberg Business Week. Tim Stenevec and Emily Grafeo in for Carol Masser on this Jobs Friday, June 7th. Among the most read on the Bloomberg terminal this afternoon is a story about how high schoolers in the New York City area are no longer going to those colleges in the Northeast, like the one I went to, and instead they're flocking south to the colleges like the one you went to.
Yeah, this is a story that hits home for me. I'm from the Northeast. I went to a Southern school, and you can see the quote in this story on the Bloomberg terminal. Everyone seems to be having the same idea to go to the South because everyone you meet that's out of state is from the North. And I can totally attest to that. When I went to the University of Virginia, I met a lot of people that were from my town, and I didn't know them when I was growing up in the town, but I met them at Virginia.
Yeah, I had the opposite experience at college in Central Maine because I went to a school from California in one of the coldest climates in the United States, and I would tell people I was from California, and they were like, "What are you doing here?"
Why are you here?
Yeah, and it's a question that I ask myself still to this day. We got data, though. We're Bloomberg. In recent years, the growth in applications to Southern colleges has far outpaced those on the East Coast, which is where the bulk of liberal arts and Ivy League institutions are located. Apps to colleges in the South are up 50% since 2019, which compares to less than a 30% rise in New England and the Mid-Atlantic. That's according to data from the Common Application.
And while the cost of attendance at many top institutions has stretched past $90,000 a year, a $55,000 price tag for an out-of-state student at University of Alabama, for example, can seem like a bargain, a relative bargain. So that cost reason is perhaps one reason why these students are flocking to the South. But of course, also, you go to a big state school, it's just a lot more fun, Tim.
Is it?
Yeah, you go to sports games, Greek life. It's a lot of fun.
The football games sound just absolutely wild. Both Clemson University in South Carolina and Louisiana State University saw a record number of students apply last year, more than twice as many students enrolling from New York and New Jersey than 10 years ago. Check out this story and more on the Bloomberg terminal and at Bloomberg.com as well. Coming up next, we're joined by our Bloomberg TV team for our cross-platform coverage on radio, TV, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals. It's Beyond the Bell, and it starts right now.
Beyond the Bell Comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostic alongside Bonnie Quinn. We're counting you down to the closing bell. Here to help take us beyond the bell. It's a global simulcast. We're joined right now by Tim Stenovic and Emily Grafeo as we welcome our audiences across our Bloomberg platforms. That includes television, radio, and yes, Tim Stenovic, those folks still watching us on YouTube.
We're everywhere. You can't get away from us, which is fine on a day like today, which is a Jobs Friday. I got to tell you that with the data that we saw come this morning at 8:30 Wall Street time, I was expecting a bigger reaction with the equity market, given that we're kind of seeing this reset when we think the Fed is going to cut rates. Just not seeing that with equities today.
It's
kind
all
of
about
a whole
the
lot
bond
of nothing
market.
happening.
It's all about bonds.
It is all about the bond market.
That's what Bloomberg's Michael McKenzie told us earlier today. And you look at that market, we have the 2-year up almost 16 basis points, a big sell-off there in the market after that hot labor market data.
You have to wonder if this whole idiom of sell in May, go away just doesn't work this year, right? We're at record highs, and even if we're seeing a slight sell-off, I mean, I'm not sure you could even call it a sell-off. It really is in individual names and individual stories.
Yeah, and we talk about this idea coming off those record highs from earlier this week here and setting up for what is now going to be a weekly gain for both the S&P and the NASDAQ. The Dow Jones Industrial Average also clinging to a weekly gain. But the Russell 2000, those small caps, the mid caps, the transports, all lagging this week once again.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question that I have is how this data that we got today when it comes to payrolls, Romaine, changes what the Fed at least does in its dot plot next week, which we'll get on Wednesday. It's kind of the next big catalyst.
Yeah, those economic projections are going to be huge because they are going to have to make some shifts because so much has changed in the last few weeks since the last one we got 2 meetings ago. Let's walk you through the numbers here on this Friday afternoon. The bells ring, people clap, and the markets are down. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lower by roughly about 88 points or about 0.2%, though it is going to finish higher on the week by about 0.3%. The S&P 500 lower by 6 points or 0.1%, even though it's going to finish higher by about 1.3% on the week. Similar story for the NASDAQ Composite, a drop on the day of 0.2%, a gain on the week of 2%, while the Russell 2000, that has been your laggard on the day and on the week, a 1% decline here on this Friday afternoon and a more than 2% decline on a weekly basis.
Okay, peeling back one layer at least of the S&P 500, we did see 187 stocks move higher on this Friday, 313.
Can you name all 187?
No, I mean, I got to tell you, just ahead of the gainers and decliners, slim pickings.
Okay.
Today.
All right,
slim
there you have it.
pickings.
Deep tease.
Yeah.
Tell you what might be a surprise, the banks rallied. JP Morgan best among them, up 1%. If you look at the IMAP, you'll see that the financials did the best, and after that, looking at IT companies and so on. Many sectors, though, were in the red, including utilities, staples, many of those defensive plays. So it was a really bifurcated market, a little bit of risk on, and at the same time, that jobs report and the possibility of higher for longer rates definitely impacting things. Obviously, it's good for banks in certain ways if there are higher rates.
You know, I did say it was slim pickings when it came to gainers. I did want to go with Apple, though. We finished the day higher by a little over 1%.
It's a bold call.
It's a bold call. Worth, any excuse to talk about WWDC next week and what's going on out there in Cupertino, which, of course, we'll have live coverage of throughout the day and throughout the week next week, is worth talking about. According to our own Mark Gurman, WWDC this year will focus on, Romaine, I'll give you one guess. What do you think it'll be?
I don't know. What is it? It's going to be AI?
It's AI.
Oh,
that's
okay,
right.
thank
Yeah,
you.
you're right.
So does this mean that they're actually going to make Siri useful?
Yeah, I think Siri's pretty useful. I don't want to say that word over and over again, or else my phone's actually going to go off.
Oh, I disabled mine.
You did. So maybe that's why it's not useful, because you disabled it. It has gotten increasingly useful.
Like them listening in.
It's been around for more than a decade. I think it's gotten pretty useful recently. But yeah, could be getting a lot more useful. Deep integration of AI in apps, summarization features. It'll recap articles, web pages, and Safari, sum up meeting notes, text messages and emails. The question I have is who's getting texts long enough that need summaries? So
summary of a text.
A summary of a text message. Also a password manager.
If somebody's texting you text that long, then you have to need to summarize. Just cut them off. Just block their number.
That's a good idea. Yeah. All right, Apple up 1.2% today. Automakers actually traditional ICE automakers that work on internal combustion engines getting a bit of a lift today, including General Motors, higher by just about 0.2% today. This after the news that the Biden administration is easing requirements for automakers to increase the fuel efficiency of new cars following industry pushback. So here's the data. Car makers must reach an average of 50.4 miles per gallon across their fleet by 2031. That's according to a final rule that was announced today by the U.S. National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. That new standard is a 1.4 mile per gallon increase from 2026, but it's less than the 58 miles per gallon that the agency had proposed previously. So the idea here, it's better for companies that are working on cars that use traditional internal combustion engines, and not as good for those EV companies that, of course, have EV motors. And Yext shares moving higher on the day today. A little potential M&A news, higher by 9%. The company preparing to explore a sale after attracting takeover interest. This according to a report earlier from Reuters, who cited unidentified people familiar with the matter, Emily.
All right, well, Carol Massar is out, so that means Tim gets to do the gainers.
I get to
and
do the
he
gainers.
gives me the decliners, and he was very excited about this for whatever reason. But I'm happy to talk about the decliners. Let's look at DocuSign, now down only 5% at the close, but down as much as 10% on an intraday basis. Biggest drop since March 2023 after the e-signature company forecast billings for the second quarter that fell short of estimates. And that stock down despite the fact that the revenue forecast was better than expected. I'm also looking at Vail Resorts, ticker MTN. Get it? Mountain. This is a ski resort giant, and the shares dropped as much as 12%, biggest intraday decline since the height of the pandemic, March 2020, after they slashed their full-year total reported EBITDA outlook and published third-quarter earnings per share that missed estimates. Analysts reacting negatively, with J.P. Morgan cutting its stance on Vail to underweight from neutral. And finally, we are still talking about GME, GameStop.
There we go.
It's actually up over 20% when you look at it on a weekly basis, but today falling over nearly 40%. Just a lot of volatility all around. They reversed a pre-market climb. The video game retailer said in a filing it may offer and sell up to an additional $75 million shares of a Class A common stock. But I'm going to say this share decline is all about the Roaring Kitty live stream. Maybe investors just not thinking that it lived up to the hype that it was supposed to be. We had over 500,000 people watching that live stream. Romaine Bostick was one of them.
I certainly was here. I couldn't take my eyes off of it. Not sure you wanted to put money behind it. There was a lot of volatility in that stock. There was also a lot of volatility in the bond market today, particularly in U.S. Treasuries on the heels of that jobs report. A massive spike in yields, 14 to 15 basis points on the shorter end of the curve, 11 to 12 on the longer end of the curve. And we should point out that these numbers, these are some of the biggest daily moves that we've had all year long. It's at least the biggest daily move going back to mid-April. And if you remember what happened on that day, I think it was April 10th, when we had that shock CPI report to the upside that really rattled folks. This really does seem akin to that, where a lot of people were really taken off guard, folks. Everyone thought 272,000 jobs, no one thought. 77 estimates in a Bloomberg survey, not a single one was at that number.
The question is, does this provide yet another buying opportunity? If you missed the last 4 buying opportunities, Stephen Major has been big on this at HSBC. You know, the 2-year yield has hit 5% several times, and investors, perhaps not the first time, not the second time, not the third time, maybe not even the 4th time, trusted that they should get in. Is now the time, or are we going to go higher once again?
Well, that's why I was so surprised to see such a muted reaction from the equity market, given that it might change what the Fed was going to do this year. And if that happens, then, you know, the way that investors value these stocks using discounted cash flows will change, because rates will change, Emily. So it was a really surprising reaction, at least in the equity market, given what we saw in the bond market.
Yeah, and especially when you think about what had happened earlier this week with stocks kind of shrugging off the JOLTS data, but the bond market reacting really heavily. It seems like for the equity market, at least before the bell and the declines right before the bell, they just don't seem to mind.
Yeah.
Bad economic news is good. Good economic news is good.
Well, this really does set us up, though, because next week is going to be huge. We get a CPI report in the middle of the week, which happens to come on the same day that we get that Fed announcement. There's a lot of other cross currents out there. So what better reason than to launch our show,
Oh.
The Close, a big relaunch, and we're actually going to be in a brand new studio, Tim. Unfortunately, you won't be there. You and Carol have to stay in the radio booth, but
Hey, we'll have our time.
Yeah, one reason is why we've been on this set for the last couple weeks. They've been rebuilding ours, and this is more than just about the optics here. This really is a refresh and a closer look here at just how important the final hour of trading really is, guys. This is critical. You talk about the volume in this market. The majority of that volume comes in the final hour of trading, really in the final half hour of trading. And you're not going to really understand what's going on, and more importantly, what the setup is going to be for the day after, unless you're watching us here at that time, right here on Bloomberg. Look at those pretty faces that we have on the screen right now, Tim. You want to read them, or should I?
You go ahead.
Steve Wozniak, going to be joining us on Monday. Former Apple co-founder, the former CEO of IBM, Sam Palmisano, the bond king, Bill Gross. Olu Alagana going to be joining us over at Mercer, and Raghuram Rajan, of course, former India central bank chief, also going to be joining us. And really, that's just 5 amongst, I think we have something like 75 people joining us next week. I could be off on my count here, and they're all wonderful, Tim.
You're setting it up to be really high expectations, Romain.
Yeah,
so,
I know. Overpromise and underdeliver. Isn't that how it goes?
I think that's not what we say. Hey, it's been great being with you guys on Beyond the Bell. I look forward to whatever happens on Monday in the new iteration of The Close. Looking forward to that. And also, I wish you all the best weekend, because that does it for Beyond the Bell, our cross-platform coverage of the market close on Bloomberg Television and Radio, Bloomberg Originals and YouTube.
Is Emily going to be here too?
On Monday, she's not going to be here. Carol will be back.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you know what?
I'll be here later today covering the S&P 500 rebalance.
Okay, there we go. You can look forward to that. Have a great weekend, everyone. We'll see you later.
This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio.
It is Bloomberg Business Week. Once again, Emily Grafeo in for Carol Masser this afternoon. I'm Tim Stenevec. A way hotter than expected payrolls report. We've been talking about that all afternoon. We did also get some weaker than expected economic data earlier this week, which made today even more shocking. This all ahead of next week's June Federal Reserve meeting. And then outside of the U.S., an election shock in the world's largest democracy. It's just some of the backdrop for tonight's episode of Bloomberg Wall Street Week with David Weston tonight at 6 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Television and Bloomberg Radio. David with us right now in the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. David, we've been trying to make sense of the labor data that we got this morning, the payrolls report, given that the ADP and JOLTS data we got was light, but the payroll data exceeded all estimates. How are you thinking about this tension?
Even as there are some reports that maybe we're overestimating the jobs market anyway, that we're 50,000 over every month. So
that was remarkable yesterday.
Yeah, exactly.
Wasn't it?
Maybe we shouldn't be paying attention to these numbers anyway, because we're not really sure.
Yes, it's all about the revisions.
But it's sure stronger than we thought it would be. I mean, but going back to what you were talking before, the divergence between the bond market and the equity market, that's been happening all year long. We started out at 6, right? 6 cuts.
Yeah.
You know, and now to maybe 1. You know,
maybe 1 in December.
Yeah, maybe 1 in December, and yet the equity market just keeps going. One of the questions we're actually going to be talking tonight was with Sarah Ketter about Causeway Capital is how much of this is AI and AI spinoff. And she has a theory that you've got like a first order of AI, which is obviously NVIDIA, people like that. But she thinks there's a second order of the things that are ancillary to that now will start to kick in as the NVIDIA gets overpriced, if anything.
Like beyond data centers, beyond utilities?
But also some of the memory chips. She thinks long-term memory, there's ancillary things that you'll need, and power, obviously, we've talked about before. But that's one of her theses, at least, that's what's really supporting a lot of this market at this point, that it's very excited about AI.
What are you going to be talking about when it comes to the Fed meeting coming up? Because as we know, the market isn't pricing in really any action for next week. If we do get a cut, it'll likely be a lot later on in the year.
Well, the fact that there's no news doesn't keep us from talking about it, right?
Oh, it certainly doesn't.
But actually, one of the things we have Ralph Schlosstein on tonight, the emeritus chair of Evercore. And one of the things he talks about is deal making and M&A and why he thinks the Fed is basically irrelevant, that they're not paying attention to that anymore at all. That's not the issue.
Interesting.
They pay attention to economic uncertainty more in a broader sense, but not what the speculate about the Fed. In part because he says there's so much money available, actually, despite the 500 basis point increase in rates. He said there is just a wall of money out there that is waiting to be put out for credit. He says, if anything, the risk may be that the lenders feel that they have money burning a hole in their pocket and they got to give it to somebody.
That's so contrary to what we hear about a high interest rate environment. The whole idea of a higher rate environment
But
is
that's
that
part of the dilemma, isn't it? That
Yeah.
one would have thought if you'd start at the beginning of the year and said 500 basis points, what does that do to the availability of credit? You say, I think the Fed would say it's going to dry it up. It's going to tighten financial conditions, right? But he said, at least in the M&A space, that they're not seeing that at all. There's plenty of money available. That's not a constraining factor right now.
I don't know if you saw the news that I was just talking about on the close, David, about the Biden administration easing requirements for automakers to increase fuel efficiency of new cars following industry pushback. You get into autos on the program today.
Yeah, we do have a big section on autos, but just to that point, I mean, I think the lesson there for me, at least, looking at that is you can lead a consumer to EVs, you can't make them buy them. You know, because it's a good theory. All the car companies had this theory, we're going to go all EVs all the time. But you know what? They're not buying them.
I think the data's there, and I also think you and I have some anecdotes about this, too.
No, it's exactly right. It's exactly right. So it was sort of almost inevitable that they were going to have to back off this because I don't think they can make those numbers that they had out there before. But we do go out to Detroit, back in my home stomping ground. I'm not from Detroit, but from Flint, which is nearby. Yeah. It's the wrong side of the tracks from Detroit, believe it or not, because there's a big announcement. It was yesterday when they reopened Michigan Central Station, which is this huge, really iconic railway station built in 1913 at the heyday when really Ford was just getting going. And Ford stepped up with just under $1 billion that they invested in redoing this. And I'll tell you, it is gorgeous. It is just gorgeous out there. And so we talked with Jim Farley at Michigan Central. And one of the things we asked him about is, why did Ford do this? Why did it make sense? This is part of what he had to say.
The train station is very much a symbol, a kind of a mark along our journey to create a great company. And we avoided bankruptcy, which was amazing in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. But to build a vibrant company, you know, in the EV world, the digital vehicle world, the train station felt like the right kind of challenger project for Ford to be part of, so that we could be part of the, you know, revitalization of Detroit, which had really been kind of used by almost the national media as a, you know, example of the decay of the country. And this felt like the kind of project that would be emblematic of our recovery as a company.
His point there about the media using it, I actually looked up, you know, Wikipedia, Michigan Central. There are more than a dozen movies that have been made in the decrepit Michigan Central because it was the ultimate post-apocalypse setting. It was just so awful in there.
What strikes me about what Farley told you is that Ford is, and Detroit is not the motor city that it used to be by any means. I mean, here in the United States, you have cars built all over the U.S. You have Ford and GM built outside of the U.S. Mexico is a huge supplier, a huge assembler of quote-unquote American vehicles. But is this Ford doubling down on Detroit?
Well, it is in this sense, and I think Detroit is doubling down on itself. GM is doing the same thing, frankly. As a center for innovation, and that's where they have their headquarters, and the University of Michigan is going in with a major thing backed by Steve Ross to have a tech center, sort of educational graduate degree program in downtown Detroit. But they've much more gone away from the unskilled workers, the tech workers. It's become a tech platform. In fact, Michigan Central, you know, is a passenger rail terminal. It's not going to be anymore. Amtrak doesn't go in there because people don't take trains to Detroit anymore. What it is a tech hub. And so they've redone there's a huge office building above the station itself, and Google's taken a big chunk of that. They've got a building just adjoining that is a mobility innovation center. And in fact, it's the only road, according to the mayor, Mike Duggan, who we talk with, it's the only road in the United States where it is electrified. They have put coils under the pavement. So if you drive your car and park it there, it charges your electric vehicle while it's parked there.
Hey, we thought, you know, building EV charging stations was tough. Just wait until doing this all over.
Put it in all your roads.
Hey, before we let you go, David, we can't let you leave without talking a little bit about what happened in India over the last few days, because I think it was shocking to so many people.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. It was so shocking because it was talking about a landslide, as many as 400 seats.
Exit polls showed that.
But having heard that, it's one of those stories that as soon as you hear it, you think, well, of course. I've been saying, how do you do an exit poll in India? How would that work? It doesn't work in the United States. And you've got hundreds of millions of voters, and how exactly does this work? And we're shocked that the exit poll was inaccurate, but it was. So we have Raghuram Rajanan, the former Reserve Bank of India governor. And it's interesting, he is very bullish on what this election means for the Indian economy. He says that actually the strongman position that actually Mr. Modi had gotten more and more peremptory in his actions, having to accommodate some of the rest of the population will actually lead to better economic decisions. And he thinks ultimately better foreign direct investment into the country.
Hey, well, to that end, I saw a tweet from none other than Elon Musk a little earlier today congratulating Modi and saying that he continues to look forward to continue working with him. So,
well, it's a very important economy.
Yeah, it really is. You have every big tech CEO heading over there in addition to many other CEOs. Hey, catch up Bloomberg Wall Street Week at 6 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio and Television with none other than David Weston joining us here in the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. Coming up next, we'll tell you about the best thing you can do in the Hamptons this summer.
It's 421 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long at Bloomberg. GameStop shares plunged again today. GameStop down another 39% after the highly anticipated return of roaring kitty Keith Gill to YouTube, as well as the video game retailer unexpectedly releasing earnings and announcing plans to sell up to 75 million additional shares. GameStop today down 39%, among other meme names. AMC Entertainment lower today by 15.2%. Turned out to be a down day for the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ. 6-point drop in the S&P 500 index on this jobs Friday. S&P ends the week, heads into the weekend at 53.46, down 0.1%. Dow Industrials down 0.2%, down 87 points. NASDAQ down 40, a drop there of 0.2. 10-year yield 4.43% with a 2-year at 4.88%. Spot gold lower by 3.6%, 22.91 the ounce, closing below 2,300 on gold. West Texas Intermediate crude 75.23 a barrel, down today by 0.4%. So again, recapping, the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all ending the day in the red. 6-point drop on the S&P to 53.46. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thanks so much for that update, Charlie Pellet. Certainly do appreciate it. Well, it's not going to concerts or surfing. It's not shopping. No. The hottest thing to do in the Hamptons this summer is tuna fishing. Our own Kate Crater writing in one of the most read stories on the Bloomberg terminal about the increasing number of folks who, in recent years, for a variety of reasons, have gone fishing. James Gaddy is deputy editor of Bloomberg Pursuits. He edited Kate's story, and he's here in the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. I love trend pieces like this. And it kind of taught me something that I had no idea that people were doing. Maybe it's because I'm not getting on my Blade helicopter on Friday afternoons, flying out to Montauk, getting up at 4 a.m.
You gotta live.
I gotta live, James. I gotta live. Why is tuna fishing so hot right now?
I mean, I don't know, when was the last time you took a charter out to go fishing?
Yeah, that would be the last never. Yeah.
I did once.
Oh,
and
nice.
it was like a 12-hour kind of like endurance fest.
A 12-hour tour.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
And it's not that anymore. It's a lot easier, a little bit more accessible for people who are busy but they've got the money to kind of do it. You know, boats are faster these days. They'll get you out. The engines are a little bit more powerful, so they'll get you out a little bit faster than they used to. They're more comfortable. Some restrictions in fishing. Some of like these like smaller feeder fish that these big game fish feed on. They've really repopulated those populations, I guess. And so the fish are like a lot closer. We talked to Will Cornikia, who manages the Montauk Anglers Club in Montauk, and he said you used to have to go out like 100 miles to find these big game fish. Now it's like 20, 25 miles. And so it's really shortened sort of like the distance that you have to go to get these kind of like, you know, the wall-mounted fish. And then, as you mentioned, you know, these flight sharing options like Blade, you can get from Teterboro to the Montauk Airport, which is literally across the street from the Montauk Anglers Club in 40 minutes.
So give us the day in the life of, you know, a Wall Street bond trader, you know, someone who's taking their day to do one of these chartered fishing trips.
So you want me to kind of imagine I'm not in the office
on a Friday afternoon?
On a Friday afternoon.
In the studio talking to us about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, you would go, you catch a flight. You can catch a Blade helicopter that's $1,000 seats each way. Or you can go to Teterboro, take a Cessna. The seats are a little bit cheaper there. You would land, you know, after about a 45-minute flight. You go to the airport. Montauk Anglers Club is right across the street. Go have some beers, have some calamari at the Gin Beach Cafe, and hang out with your buds. And then you stay overnight at the, I don't know, hotel nearby. Wake up at 4, start to get on the boat, and, you know, catch a bunch of fish, and you're back by 11 a.m., noon on a Saturday with a cooler full of fish that you can, as one person did, take to a local sushi chef and have them prepare it 8 different ways.
And if you had to check your email while you were on the boat, you could do so because of Starlink, Musk's satellite internet service. That was my favorite tidbit from the story.
I would make fun of you for doing it.
For checking your email, right. But I would want to use the Starlink internet.
I feel like it makes sense.
How fast is it?
I don't know. If you're like a bond trader or you work on Wall Street, correct me if I'm wrong, but and the markets are closed on a Saturday. Do you really need to be checking your email? I can understand if you're playing hooky you're out there on a Friday maybe.
Yeah.
But
hey, you know, in every group of friends, there's always that one person who's on their phone.
Yeah. Maybe the dating apps are calling. You got to check your Raya when you're out there. I don't know.
That's what they're using.
That's maybe what's going on. Okay, so talk to us a little bit about the trends that they're seeing, though, because this is Bloomberg. We have the numbers. We have the data. This is not just anecdotal. The marinas are filling up.
Yeah. More people bought boats during the pandemic, and so those I think the slips at Montauk Anglers Club, there's 150. But even like fishing tournaments have more memberships. I think 20% increase, and the guy who runs that, I believe his name is Chris Squarey.
Yeah, Chris Squarey, Atlantic Yacht Haven.
Yeah. He said, you're seeing a lot more Wall Street types, along with Joe Fisherman. And and then even some of these like memberships, Dean Lambros at Canyon Runner in the Jersey Shore, he said his memberships have increased 20% year over year. So and they're just like, it's these guys who stay at the desk all day. They just want to get out. They're tired of being in the office.
One thing I wonder about with this is it the type of thing that you want to do once and you go out? Was that your question?
I was going to ask that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So that's good.
It's like,
that means it's a good question.
Is it the type of thing that you're like, okay, like I went skydiving once in college. And I'm like, I'm never going to do that again. I'm not comparing chartering a boat to going skydiving, but it's the type of thing it's like, okay, you do it once, you scratch that itch, you get that sushi, 8 different ways. Are you going to want to do it again? Are they going to get repeat business?
I mean, one of the guys we talked to, Daniel Regina, he's been going several times over the last few years. He went last September. I think it kind of depends. If you're like me, I went once and I loved it and it was great memory. I think a lot of people might have a special occasion that they do it for. You get your friends together and go out and spend the morning on a boat, and that might be the only time you ever do it. But I do think there's definitely, like, if you live, if you go or if you summer, in the Hamptons, I think absolutely you're doing it more than once.
So how much does this cost on average? How much people paying to charter a boat? And
Will said it's hard to say because it depends on how many people are coming, depends on how long you're going to be out there. Average about $3,000, not including airfare.
No, yeah, that part, or the hotel, and the entire weekend out in the Hamptons. That's why you got to go, find some friends who have a boat, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. Get a big group together, go with them, spread that charge out.
Find a friend who bought a boat during the pandemic and help them defray the cost.
Exactly. Hey, James, while we have you here, want to go off script a little bit and just talk about what else is on the agenda over at Bloomberg Pursuits right now and what you guys are thinking about that you can talk about. I know a lot is kept under lock and key in the Pursuits vault.
Yes.
I don't want Chris Rouser calling me up and saying, how dare you talk about that?
Our diamond-encrusted vault.
The diamond-encrusted Bloomberg Pursuits vault. It has all the secrets of Bloomberg Pursuits. But what's on your radar right now?
Next week, we're really looking at summer entertaining. Prices of a restaurant meal are going up as opposed to prices at like grocery stores. And so we have a solution, and it's called a picnic.
I've heard of this before.
Yes. So we have created the perfect picnic. It'll be on Pursuit's website next week. A list of amazing snacks and charcuterie boards and expensive hummus. And we have a playlist that we have commissioned a wonderful DJ duo. They created a Spotify playlist exclusively for us. And anybody can listen to it. It'll be online next week.
You got to download the playlist. That's my tip for park dwellers, because you don't know if you have the bandwidth to stream it. So if you ever go to Central Park, Sheep Meadow, download your music before you get there.
Is the Sheep Meadow that crowded?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And our producer,
Emily,
just said that I'm right.
That's amazing. Yeah. Elizabeth Sedrin just saying, you know what?
Do you want to write for Pursuits?
I was going to say.
Maybe. Like I was
James,
saying
you're in
before,
Brooklyn, right?
It's a more fun side of
James and I, we go to Prospect Park. We don't have the problem. It's not, we don't have the problem with with the cell phone service.
Yeah,
in Prospect
it's
Park.
dogs. They're not
It's
getting
just-
Wi-Fi.
It's exactly just dogs and kids and strollers. Okay, so you got that coming up on the agenda. I also do want to encourage everybody to check out our weekend show and our weekend podcast, which you can download or listen to over the weekend here on Bloomberg Radio, because we do check in with Chris Rouser of Bloomberg Pursuits. We talk about the best shows on Broadway to go see this summer. In addition to that, a great spread about travel and the way that hotels and increasingly travel agencies are appealing to a large portion of the population here in the U.S. Who have issues with sensory things. So think like ADHD, autistic, different processing afflictions, and the way that hotels are working with those individuals to create experiences that work really well for them and their entire families. That is happening this weekend, but if you can't wait, check out Bloomberg.com and, of course, Business Week for the latest with Bloomberg Pursuits. James Gaddy, Deputy Editor of Bloomberg Pursuits here in the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio. Let's get a check on the latest world and national news. We got Amy Morris in the Bloomberg 99.1 newsroom in Washington, D.C. Hey, Amy.
Hey, Tim. Secretary of State Antony Blinken headed back to the Middle East. Blinken is working to keep a ceasefire proposal between Israel and Hamas alive. He will meet with senior officials as he continues to push forward that plan that the Biden administration says would pause fighting and guarantee the release of Israeli hostages. Next week's trip will be his 8th visit to the region since the war began. The U.S. military's temporary pier off Gaza's coast has been fixed now. It's been reattached to the beach. U.S. Central Command Vice Admiral Brad Cooper said the no U.S. boots on the ground policy, that's still in effect, and they do expect to continue the delivery of humanitarian aids in the next couple of weeks. About $225 million in U.S. military aid will make its way to Ukraine. That delayed funding, blamed on political infighting of the U.S. Congress, allowed Russia to make some gains on the battlefield. Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky put aside his frustrations and made it clear that, just like 80 years ago, this war cannot be won without the U.S.
Like it was during World War II, how the United States helped to save human lives, to save Europe, and we count on your continuing support and standing with us.
President Biden offered an apology to Ukraine's president for that 6-month wait while the two were attending D-Day commemorations in France. The federal gun trial of President Biden's son Hunter Biden has adjourned for the weekend after testimony from defense witnesses, including his daughter, Naomi Biden. Now, testimony is expected to wrap on Monday. Jurors will then hear closing arguments and instructions from the trial judge and begin deliberations. Hunter Biden is accused of purchasing a firearm while he was addicted to drugs and then lying on the form when he bought the weapon. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg.
It's 4:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ ended jobs Friday in the red today, right to the numbers, with the S&P down 6, finishing the week, heading into the weekend at 53.46, down 0.1%. The Dow dropped 87 points, down 0.2%. The NASDAQ Composite Index down 40, a drop there of 0.2%. A solid jobs report made traders dial back their bets on Fed rate cuts. 10-year yield 4.43%, the 2-year 4.88%. Spot gold hard hit today, down 3.6%, dropping $84 the ounce, back below 2,300. The precious metal now at $22.91 the ounce. A retreat as well for crude, down 26 cents a barrel, 75.29 on WTI, down by 0.3%. A hotter-than-expected jobs report this morning. Acting U.S. Labor Secretary Julie Su was interviewed on Bloomberg Radio, and she was asked where all of those new jobs are coming from.
We saw growth in leisure and hospitality. We saw it in construction. We saw it in professional services. We saw it in healthcare. And so, there's really, the numbers don't lie. It's really, a broad-based, solid, continued growth. And I think that coveted soft landing that so many people bet against.
And you can hear more of the conversation with the acting Labor Secretary coming up tonight on Balance of Power, 5 o'clock Wall Street time. The plunge for GameStop shares continued today. GameStop down 39.3%. Keith Gill, Roaring Kitty, back on YouTube today, but the stock sold off. GameStop again down by 39%. Among some of the other meme stock names, AMC Entertainment down 15.2%. Recapping, S&P down 6 points, drop of 0.1%. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much for that update, Charlie Pellet. We love chocolate here on Bloomberg Business Week. And I think a lot of people who might eat chocolate regularly might not understand the complicated economics that go into chocolate. You got to rely on fluctuations in commodity prices.
Oh, yeah.
Cocoa prices. We've talked about this year.
I have written about a number of hedge funds, specifically CTAs this year, that have made so much money this year trading cocoa futures because the price has just gone absolutely parabolic. Like, people have made millions and millions of dollars trading in this market. And yeah, you don't realize that when you eat a piece of chocolate.
Well, then they can go and buy a lot of chocolate. One person who does think about this stuff day in and day out is Courtney Vuchnik, the co-founder of Lovo Chocolate. She joins us from Toronto. Courtney, good to have you with us. When I say chocolate, the chocolate that you make at Lovo Chocolate is different than other milk chocolate because it's plant-based. Talk a little bit about the market that you saw, the opportunity that you saw a few years ago when you developed this.
Well, first, thanks so much for having me. I love talking about chocolate. We have had a dark chocolate brand for about 13 years called Pasha Chocolate. And the dark chocolate end of the category represents about 20% of the category. And since we've had that brand, we always wanted to have a milk chocolate sister brand. And at the same time, as we started to think about this, I was looking in people's fridges and being a bit snoopy about what people were buying. And we in the US have seen an enormous growth in the plant milk liquid category beyond anyone's expectations. Like last year, 50% of Americans purchased a plant milk. And the thing that I discovered is that people weren't just buying one plant milk. They were buying maybe almond milk for their cereal and oat milk for their smoothie, but it didn't mean they were giving up dairy. But we had started our process of trying to create a milk chocolate that tasted like a dairy bar. And as this, torpedo growth happened within the liquid sector, we thought, wait a minute, we're making a mistake. We've got to focus on the taste of plant milk, the gorgeous, deep, nutty, or oaty taste that Americans weren't seeing as a trade-off. They were loving it, and they were picking it up more and more and more.
So essentially what you were going about it, in your opinion, the wrong way. You didn't want to try to recreate the milk part of milk chocolate. You wanted to recreate the oat or almond part of the oat milk or almond milk category.
Precisely. And we also knew when we did this pivot, we knew that, of course, we are not selling a liquid that's going into something else that you're making. We're selling a gorgeous, decadent, rich, creamy milk chocolate bar. That's what consumers want, a Moorish product that they can't put down. So we knew that we had to go to Switzerland, the creator and the home of milk chocolate for 150 years. We knew that if we went there, we could take advantage of all the techniques and the professionalism in the category. Remember that Europe's capita consumption of chocolate is double of North America. And we went over to Switzerland and developed our products there to create something that was as creamy, as gorgeous as a milk chocolate bar. And that was the beginning of Lovo, which is the first and only line of dairy-free milk chocolate made from your favorite plant milks.
So how has the process been of getting Lovo onto grocery store shelves? Because chocolate feels like one of those markets where people are really attached to their brands, and often these big name brands, Mars, Hershey's. How have you been able to kind of navigate the industry?
Well, people are not falling out of love with their chocolate. They have generally a group of chocolate bars or brands that they, rotate between. It's sort of what we call a repertoire collection. But at the same time, we felt that people wanted something different than this. They wanted something that allowed for something that was slightly better for you, better for the planet. And so we decided that, first of all, we would launch online and we would continue to adjust and continue to learn as I talked to hundreds of women across the US. And the thing that was really interesting is that the retailers have really seen that there is room in the category to expand in this area. So, we're on the shelves now at places like Walmart and Albertsons and the Berkeley Bowl in California and Fairway. And, across major retailers, across specialty, across natural. The thing that is our huge challenge, though, is we have to get people to pick it up and try it. We're launching into part of the category, as I said, that doesn't exist. And we have to, as soon as they try it, they love it, is our experience. They don't feel like there's a trade-off. They think it's delicious and it's different. And that's what we have to focus on this
Emily, we got to try it.
My mouth is watering.
Yeah. It's like, we're talking about this for 10 minutes and we're,
I want it.
Yeah. Okay. Where can you get it in New York?
We can get it at Fairway, which I'm sure is very close to you. I can send you a list from it'd be best if I looked up your zip code and sent it to you directly.
All right. I'm not going to bore everyone with just finding it, spending the next 2 minutes doing that. Emily, help me out here.
Well, can you talk a little bit more about the strategies that you guys are using to break into this? It's interesting. You said you're 100% family funded, women co-founded, and a predominantly women employed brand.
So when we spoke to women about their chocolate consumption, the female, and we spoke to some men, but primarily women, chocolate is an incredibly important part of their daily life. It's a private relationship that they have. Not that they don't share it with their friends, but they also keep it for themselves. And they have a pause in the insanity of what they're trying to do every 24 hours and eat that chocolate. And women told me stories about taking it and hiding it. It's pivotal to them, and they feel really passionate about it. And we wanted to create a world that represented that dreamscape, where they could float away for a moment.
I love that.
And I became really focused on wanting to make a movie about it, wanting to make a little film, and obviously we're a startup, as you said, and, we're spending our pennies very carefully. So we worked really hard to create something that.
Courtney, we gotta run. We're out of time, but I can't wait to try it. I just found on the website there are plenty of places near us where we can go and buy it. That's Courtney Vuchnik, the co-founder of Lovo Chocolate, joining us from Toronto.
headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. 4:53 on Wall Street. GameStop shares tumbled further today after the highly anticipated return of Keith Gill to YouTube, as well as the video game retailer unexpectedly releasing earnings and announcing plans to sell up to 75 million additional shares earlier in the day. The stock sank 39% following Gill's appearance on the Roaring Kitty stream on YouTube. Federal judge has ruled that Alphabet will face a bench trial instead of a jury in the Justice Department's antitrust case alleging monopolization of the advertising technology market after the company paid the federal government $2.3 million. Alphabet shares today down by 1.3%. Rent the Runway shares dropped today after the consumer goods rental company reported first quarter revenue that slightly missed expectations. Bloomberg Television spoke this morning with CEO Jennifer Hyman, who talked about expanding the company's brick and mortar operations.
So we see that women would come into the store to get dressed for work every single day, or they'd come in groups after work to get dressed for their night out. And that really just built the virality of Rent the Runway in the markets that we were in. So we're going to be super aggressive about going into retail throughout the United States. We're opening our flagship store in New York again this month. It's a soft launch for the summer with a huge launch happening in September. And we believe that the online plus the in real life experiences really drive tremendous, not only growth, but brand love.
Jennifer Hyman, CEO of Rent the Runway today. Rent the Runway down 13.4%. Those are our top company stories at this hour, and this is Bloomberg.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio and Television.
It is a Bloomberg Business Week. Let's get a check on the latest world and national news. We got Amy Morris in the Bloomberg 991 newsroom in Washington, D.C. Hey, Amy.
Hi, Tim. Hunter Biden could still take the stand in his federal firearms trial in Delaware after the jury was sent home today. Hunter's lawyers said they still haven't decided if he's going to testify, and they have until Monday to make that decision. The president's son is accused of illegally buying and possessing a gun while being addicted to drugs back in 2018. President Biden paid tribute to the Army Rangers who captured a heavily fortified German position during the invasion of Normandy. While speaking from the cliffs of Pont de Hoc, Biden connected the Allied powers' fight for freedom on D-Day to supporting sovereignty in Ukraine and around the world. He says it's critical to preserve freedom and democracy at home and abroad. He also is apologizing to Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky for the 6-month delay in military aid. And with that apology comes about $225 million. It's part of the $61 billion that has been held up by political infighting in Congress, which allowed Russia to make gains on the battlefield. Vladimir Zelensky was grateful to have his military revitalized and hopes an end to the war is coming soon.
I hope that it will be a first step on this way to peace. We need peace in Ukraine.
The funding will be used to restore the country's damaged power grid and will help pay for munitions. And Secretary of State Antony Blinken is going back to the Middle East. He's working to keep that ceasefire proposal between Israel and Hamas alive. Blinken will meet with senior officials as he pushes forward that plan that the Biden administration says can pause fighting and guarantee the release of Israeli hostages, setting in motion the rebuilding of Gaza and a longer-term solution to the conflict. Next week's trip will be his 8th visit to the region since the war began. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris. Now back to Bloomberg Business Week with Tim Stenevec and Emily Grafeo.
Hey, Amy, thanks so much, and happy Friday, by the way. Okay, so this is among the most read on the Bloomberg terminal in the last hour. At last check, it was the second most read. Kim Basine, you see his name on the byline, you know it's going to be just fantastic.
Right.
It's about the NBA's secret wine society that's not so secret anymore. I had no idea this was a thing.
This is so funny because you think basketball players and you think the most masculine people out there, athletic, and then wine, I feel like gets a bad rep. It's more feminine. Maybe beer drinking is something that you would imagine an NBA player would do more, but
I don't know. I just am shocked that these incredible athletes are drinking anything, aren't they? Like,
that's right.
Just training all the time.
They have to train.
Okay, these days, basketball stars such as Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, and Kevin Durant are full-blown wine geeks. Hall of Famer Dwayne Wade has his own label. The NBA's love affair with fermented grapes has intensified to the point that ESPN chronicled the league's secret wine society.
The society has become big business, too. In April, the NBA signed its first ever wine sponsorship deal, coming to a multi-year agreement with Kendall Jackson, Tim.
This is amazing. Okay, so Carmelo Anthony was active in business ventures during his NBA career. He's kept that focus on after his retirement from basketball last year. He partnered with Isos Capital in 2023. What they did was form a fund that was focused on sports. They've invested in companies such as DraftKings.